Hello, everyone. Happy Monday to everyone. And dear guests, we welcome you to our LinkedIn panel discussion dedicated today to discovering the opportunities that generative AI can bring to healthcare businesses. So, generative AI is definitely hype and oftentimes perceived as a panacea to the content generation. And according to McKinsey report, it's indeed one of the areas that can benefit the most from these type of solutions. But what else? A part of smart help desks, chatbots, and solutions to generate documentation can generative AI bring to healthcare businesses? And what you should be aware of when starting to play this game? These and other questions we will explore today during this hour with our experts. So please meet our experts and our speakers. Yuri Gubin, Chief Innovation Officer at DataArt, Daniel Piekarz, Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences at DataArt, Laura Heidrich, Digital Natives Manager from Google, and myself, Olga Romanova, Engagement Manager at DataArt. So let's generate some productive discussion today. Generative AI is revolutionizing the AI experience and making it more affordable and democratic. One doesn't need to hold a PhD to enjoy the benefits of AI anymore. Yur, you've been in industry for a while, and could you share your personal experience and observations how the introduction of generative AI shaped the industry and the experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start by saying that there are actually two steps. So one, what changed is the perception of complexity. When the whole ChatGPT and generative AI trend emerged 12, 15 months ago, everyone realized that it is that accessible and it works and the quality is acceptable to humans and it is actually right there. So you can actually go and try working with generative AI. However, the whole world, industry, big players had roughly 12 months to then experiment with what it actually means to build a Gen AI for real business in different use cases, in different areas, geographic locations, and so on and so forth. So what has changed in the last, again, 12 months is that um, the field, the generative AI matured enough. So there are new blueprints, there are standard practices, there is something that works, there are new trends, new terms, and already pre-built services and solutions. So not only the perception of complexity has changed, but also the amount of effort, the volume of unknowns that is out there is also decreased and removed. And what we have right now is a perfect tool that actually works, and it is not the question of whether we try or not. The question is what kind of product you can build, what will generate value to your customers, to your employees, and how to get there quickly and de-risk the exercise while you're going there. And yes, it is the concern, like maybe number one for organizations from the top level, from the board level, all the way to engineering, product owners, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty much everywhere. And yeah, it is no longer a mystery. It is a technology. It is something that can deliver the value.
Thank you so much. And GenAI, Laura, has been an offering and focus for Google for some time already, right?
DeepMind from Google was actually able to play to beat the reigning champion in the Go game, which was, and I needed to look that up, 2015. So it's been quite a while ago. But also examples from the healthcare industry, of course, was when AlphaFold was able to predict the folding of proteins, which was a quantum leap back then. And this is not even covering everything we did, as Yuri said, in the last 12 to 18 months. Here we really invested heavily in making sure that we got solutions for everyone out there, similar to what has been described, depending on the user's need. So it's something for developers, but also business users, so super simple in its application and its usage, but also AI practitioners. We have sidebar panels for easy access. We have pre-built models, really everything to make sure that the benefits that AI can bring are actually reaped and are realized.
In healthcare, AI and AI solutions have been already utilized for a while and proved their applicability and efficiency and sometimes overperform the human beings. But before we dive into in terms of what generative AI brings to healthcare industry. Yuri, I think it's important to maybe draw a line. Where is the border of, let's say, the classic traditional AI and generative AI? Could you help us with this?
Yeah, and I think that in practical terms, the difference is that the conventional AI, what we call it, it's something about analyzing the data that you already have. Quantification, it's clusterization, it depends on the data that you have. There are different models, there are pre-built services, there are pre-built products already. But the point is, it's all about decision making, and quantification. So it is a great tool to make an analysis and to understand your patients or trends or anomalies. On the other side, the generative AI, what we're talking about, at the first glance, this is about generation of text, generation of images, videos, sound, but it goes beyond just that. We also leverage GenAI in use cases that are not, in pure terms, generation of text. Sometimes it's summarization, sometimes it's extracting some information from the document or from the conversation, from the recording. Sometimes it is assisting employees or users in finding answers in the knowledge base. So it goes just beyond analyzing the existing data. It takes the knowledge, it takes what you have, and it also it is capable of creating something that people will understand. This is something new. This is why it's generative. And yeah, it is a very dynamic and emerging field. So things change every month, and the quality, it improves, as I say, like every month there is something new out there, there is something changing.
Thank you so much. Well, generating videos, text, images, this is clear, but it looks like probably another ChatGPT use cases, right, or whatever. So then, with regards to healthcare, do you see a significant increase in the demand for generative AI solutions, or the clients that come to you are typically try to rebuild their own ChatGPT based on the healthcare information?
Yeah, it's over the last year, it definitely, things have changed in how we talk about AI versus 2, 3, 5 years ago. And I think right now there's definitely a lot more discussion around generative AI and how it can be leveraged. Pretty much every call, every time we talk to a client or a new prospect, even if we're talking about building a mobile app or helping them integrate to electronic health record systems, even if that's their primary focus, there's always a discussion about how can GenAI help? How can we use it? And I think it's very important, and Yuri touched on this, for us to make sure, everybody in the market, they understand that GenAI is much easier to implement. In the past, we would do proofs of concepts for drug development, looking at omics data, and there was always that question, do we have the right data? How long is it going to take us to prove the model works? And sometimes you can go into a proof of concept that'll take 2, 3 months, maybe even longer. Whereas now with generative AI models and the pre-trained models, we can go in and very often within 2 or 3 weeks, do that proof of concept necessary to show that GenAI can help in a variety of different instances. When it comes to healthcare and life sciences, there's a lot of different areas of the marketplace. People tend to think about the payer, the provider, and the patient, but there's also the pharmaceutical companies. There's all the health tech companies out there that are selling software to the labs, to the payers, to the providers, direct to patients. And when you think of how GenAI can help in all these different areas, probably the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest place is to think about customer service, right? You brought up the help desk before. Yuri brought up a knowledge base. When you think about it, first off, all the software that's out there, every single company that is selling software, not only into the healthcare and life sciences space, but any market, really has to think about implementing generative AI against all of their training materials, all of their system documentation, so that all of the users can simply, within the product, just ask the question, how do I do this? And get an easy to understand answer back. This is going to save time across the board with, all of the help desk calls, with getting new patients set up on new systems, even with reach out for managing care for the hospitals to reach out and check with patients. How are you doing? Are you keeping to your care plan? A lot of this can be automated. So when you think of anything where there's a lot of people involved in the process doing mundane kind of administrative tasks, GenAI can be greatly helpful in that area. And then obviously, as Yuri said, areas like generating content, that could be marketing content, that could be personalized educational materials for a patient. All of this, GenAI just makes it a lot more efficient, but that's just scratching the surface of how GenAI can help in all the various areas of healthcare and life sciences.
Yep, absolutely. Operations administrative, I think this is easier to grasp, at least speaking about myself. And you also mentioned you started to mention some of the patient use cases. So let's talk specifics. If we talk about patient journey, how can generative AI solutions improve the solutions for patient and patient experience?
Yeah, so, one interesting thing, and this kind of ties into both the patient and the doctor. So now there are systems you can have in doctors' offices or tied into telemedicine platforms where a system is listening to the conversation and creating the medical documentation that will then be entered into the electronic health record system that can also be summarized for the patient when they check out. Obviously, the doctor is going to need to look over the suggested documentation, but it's going to save the doctor a lot of time, allow them to spend more time with the patient instead of in the system. At the same time, when you look at, for instance, readmittance to a hospital or outcomes, one statistic is one of the leading indicators that you're going to have a high level of patient readmittance, or you're going to not get all the best outcomes you would expect, is when the patient doesn't speak, at least in the States, English as their first language. This can cause a lot of misunderstandings. This can cause people to not follow the care plan, for the doctor and the patient not to understand each other. So again, generative AI tied into the ability to translate information from one language to another is going to greatly increase outcomes and for patients in this demographic. There's a lot of other areas. When you think of how patients interact with the care system, throughout most of my life, if I wanted to go to the doctor, I would pick up the phone, call the doctor, set an appointment, and visit them. Now we see telemedicine coming out where at the first touch point, maybe it's a telemedicine call. But even before that, I think at the earliest touch point, we could have generative AI with a prompt, right? A chat to be able to go and say, I have this, I have a cough. Should I go and see the doctor? Should I go on telemedicine? What do I need to do? Or should I just check my temperature and come back in a day, right? So I think we're going to change how people start that interaction with the healthcare system. And in time, I think we're going to see what I would call an AI healthcare concierge service, right? You're going to have an application. That application is going to be the application you use to find your doctors, you use to rate the doctor, you look at your care plan. It helps with medication adherence by asking you if you've taken your medicine. You speak to it as a patient diary. It's going to ask you, how are you doing today, Dan? Do you feel okay? And you're going to provide that information back to it. And that's going to tie back and help with actually, making sure your care plan is working and you're getting the outcomes expected. So there's a lot of different ways GenAI can help patients directly, and even more ways it can help the doctors or even the payers.
Yeah. I love the use case you mentioned. I'm smiling because literally last Friday I was talking to the client, and it's a bidirectional use case. You mentioned it in the context of patient experience, but long story short, in Germany, there is a need for specific doctors, and sometimes it's really hard to fill specific positions. And some of the doctors are coming from different countries, and their German is not that great. So generative AI is definitely helping with regards to, for instance, medical report generation that can be helpful both for patients and for the doctors. And if we speak about doctors, maybe you can shape some other ideas or demand that you see on the market with regards to GenAI applicability.
Yeah, so there, a few years back, I'll give one example where I think we'll see a lot of things heading. A few years back, we helped one of the largest hospitals here in the US to generate a singular view for the doctor when he's going into the EHR, right? To be when they're going to see a patient, to be able to bring up one screen where you can get all the basic stats you need to understand to meet with this patient, make sure the patient's you're taking care of whatever their specific health need is. But when we initially put that together, a lot of it was done based on, humans getting together. Okay, what do we need to know about every patient, no matter who they are? But that doesn't really personalize it to the point of, okay, what do I need to know about this patient based on their longitudinal health record, their current, chief complaint, whatever pre-existing conditions and what medications they're already taking. So AI, one of the greatest abilities it has is to be able to summarize something. So you can actually have that singular view that you as a doctor need to look at that is specifically tailored to this patient and their condition, summarized from their entire health record. So in a matter of minutes, you can go through and see everything you need to see about this patient. And I think once we get there, that's going to be an amazing jump when that's the way doctors interact with all the electronic health record systems. On top of that, though, AI, there's definitely in the healthcare world a little bit of a hesitance to AI. Nobody wants AI to replace doctors, but nobody thinks they really can. And a lot of people in the industry are starting to think of AI more as augmented intelligence, where as a doctor, I want AI to help me make better decisions. I don't want it to make decisions for me, but being able to do things like once you come up with a care plan for a patient, to get a virtual second opinion, to be able to go and say, okay, check the care plan I've given to my patient, compare it against everyone else who has similar longitudinal health records, and then show me what the best outcomes were, and if any other doctor did something different here. So it allows you to look at multiple second opinions and various things that are going to hopefully improve outcomes for the patients. And then, a variety of other things, but those are certain areas beyond just the efficiency of documenting, everything happening in the interaction, to a variety of other areas where we can just make the doctor more efficient. When it comes to clinical decision support, I do think in time, GenAI is going to be a huge impact and a huge factor there.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad that you raised this topic, right, with regards to how the generative AI solutions, how they can impact the doctor's life, right? And as one of my clients say that generative AI probably won't replace a doctor, but a doctor who's utilizing solutions with generative AI would probably replace a doctor who doesn't use this type of solutions. We talk healthcare, so it's always about access to sensitive data, medical data, patient data, and so on. So Yuri, what does that take to build the medical generative AI solution, to train it on sensitive data? What does it take? What you should be aware of with regards to compliance? Is it possible to avoid it, to collect and expose some of the sensitive data when building the generative AI solution?
Right. This is a very good question, and I would start by actually separating two concerns. One is to build an application with generative AI, leveraging the foundational model and underlying services. And the second half is to, what if you want to build your own foundational model? So these are two different topics. And yes, privacy and regulation covers pretty much everything. Whether you're sharing private information about the person, it's PII, PHI, or whether you're sharing genetic information with it, how you're making the decision, how you train the model. EU just released the regulation, and I'm sure that the rest of the world will follow. And here in the US, we do have regulation emerging at the state level. So how you handle information, how you train the models, and how you make decisions, it is a very sensitive topic, and it is being regulated, and regulation is keeping up. So expect an audit, expect that you will have to keep things auditable in the first place, transparent, that you have to have all the balances and checks in place. That's why separation of concerns is important. So if you want to build your own model and you want to, the sky's the limit. You have to be concerned with building the model that first understands the language, then medical language specifically, because it's different thing. There's so much, it is just different from finance world, for example, or general purpose language. However, if you want to build an application and see whether it actually generates value to you, whether it makes life of your employees better or life of your patients better, you can start with the first part and build an application using the services and using a platform with all the parts solved already in place. And that part you can start pretty quickly. And again, when you work on something that is already proven, that has a track record of things working on it, it is much easier for you to leverage that and to move forward. And yes, privacy and all of this is still a concern for you, but you will just split the risk, and it will be much easier for you to get started, to start experimentation, to see how it works. And you can anonymize the data, you can use pre-built models, and that is where I would think clients need to start with. Like, do not think that you want to build a foundational model, because there are so many techniques like retrieval augmented generation, reinforced learning, prompt engineering, and you can use best practices and blueprints to build the solution that you want. And I'm sure that in almost all of the cases, there is a model that will work for you to start with. So I would think about this way.
Thank you very much. And speaking about ready to go large language models, yeah, I know Google has a bunch of them. So if I'm not mistaken, Laura, in April last year, Google introduced MedPalm, which is the LLM for medical language, right, in medical use cases. Then I believe in the end of last year, Gemini was introduced as as the new game changer in the area, and MedLM also, right? I think it's also in December 2023. Could you maybe give us a step back and just an overview in terms of these models, where they are better applicable to?
Absolutely. So before I actually explain the differences and give a recommendation when to use which, let me just take one step back and also comment on the data privacy topic, because I know this is super important, especially in the healthcare industry. So with any of the models, what you can rely on is that your data that you're using it for is never fed back into training the models at Google. So this is never happening. Very important to notice. So yes, we have different options. We have MedLM. So this is a large language model which is based on MedPalm and MedPalm 2, of which you've probably heard. Those are specifically trained models for the medical domain. And as we've heard, it requires a type of personalization, modification when talking about medical data. So therefore, this is kind of the family of models we're having when it comes to very specific use cases. They were, for example, the first to pass the US medical test. There are different models available depending on the use case. So whether you want scalability or something very complex to be addressed by a model, then this is when you would probably choose one of those. Gemini, however, is a multimodal model. And what that means is that you can process text, images, and video all at the same time. So again, it's a slightly different use case, and this is also my recommendation on when to use which. It all depends on the use case. Think about what you want to achieve and pick the best model for that. And it doesn't stop there. One more recommendation I would always make is don't choose a model, choose a platform. And I'm saying that again, don't choose a model, choose the platform. Because ultimately, as we've heard, there are so many ideas and so many use cases out there. You do not want to be stuck with one model and build everything upon it. And then who knows, next month there's going to be a better model and you need to adapt again. So really choose a platform where you can test your ideas quickly, easily, securely scalable, of course, and have the option to have a great environment for your AI projects where you can really look into great tooling and enable your developers to bring great solutions to the market.
Cool, thank you very much. And with regards to Google models, are there any success stories in the healthcare, in the medical world that you're willing to share with us?
Of course. So one that I think is really fascinating comes also from the US, from the Mayo Clinic. So together with them for over 3 years, we've been working on a project where we were looking at radiotherapy for cancer treatments. So here, and don't quote me on the medical parts, please, it's important to kind of mark tumor cells versus healthy cells in the data that's in the pictures that is produced as in a scan. And it typically takes up to 7 hours for one patient to have those markers done. And thanks to our solution, we brought this time down significantly and are now able to get more people access to the tool. Another one that I was thinking of is, again, from the US, from a company called HCA Healthcare, where we're helping with the administrative tools. So exactly what Daniel mentioned before, having summary of patient records, having them played back to people in the emergency room so that they know what to expect, and having the most important parts highlighted is something that comes in super handy and really aids the right treatment and quickest treatment of patients when they need it. And a third one really recently here from Germany is from the University Hospital of Schleswig-Holstein, which is the second largest university hospital here in Germany. So here we are partnering with them on different topics, including also looking into tumor detecting in the MRT scans, etc. So really a lot of those are publicly available. As you can imagine, a lot more is currently being worked on. And I don't think there are any limits to thinking of how and where to apply GenAI in health tech. Just think about how, even on YouTube, you can, as a creator, use GenAI tools to, well, make your videos more appealing, etc. So I think there's lots available and already great examples out there that can spark inspiration.
Thank you very much. Glad to hear the success stories. And I really love that you touched upon the topic of recommendations, right? And it sounds like a good continuation of our discussion with regards to what you should be aware of, maybe some specific recommendations our expert can give to healthcare businesses if they would love to start their generative AI journey. You can start and we can continue.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I would say that because of how sophisticated the technology is and how many different use cases there, you need to establish 2 tracks, because you cannot do one without the other. You cannot think about the use cases and features you can build without understanding the technology. But at the same time, technology is a tool. You need to build a product with it. So it is a constant dialogue between what the Gen AI is capable of, and you need to establish this track. So you research, you experiment, you measure, and then the other track is you actually think about use cases. So somewhere in between, you will find a situation, a point when you will understand that, yes, this is the right candidate for a POC or for a proof of concept that we want to build. The following phase is when you actually start building something, and what to expect from this. So first, yes, monitoring, metrics, quality of responses, this is very important. How you protect the data is very important. But at the same time, measuring the quality of what was generated, tackling hallucinations, tackling and handling the ethical concerns of what was generated in the text form, this is something that you need to think about. And here comes the prompt engineering, the reinforced learning. All of this comes to support the implementation. And then what we see is happening with our customers is, first, the early adopters. It can be your own employees, someone who is actually can give you very quick feedback, someone who can transparently measure the performance of the model or of the solution. And then it's stage by stage, it's user group by user group. There is the early majority will follow, but it is the testing. It's basically what you would use to build a regular product. So it's a mix of both dimensions. I hope it helps.
Hope so too. At DataArt, I know we tried to develop a really simple solution that can demonstrate the capabilities of generative AI in the healthcare world. And yeah, today we are glad to present the CodeDoc. This is supposed to be the copilot for doctors and supports documents processing use cases when it comes, for instance, to the patient onboarding, when, as Dan mentioned, there are multiple sources of different information to the patient, right? Like medical records already, medical images, some test results, and many, many others, even some voice memos from the previous conversations between the doctor and the patient. It may be helpful with regards to some of the medical research when you have to analyze vast information of medical data and find answers to specific questions you may have. It can be actually helpful with regards to optimizations and acceleration of clinical trials process, clinical studies, when it comes to, again, analysis of the vast information of really different format, not always structured. So let me try to present it to you just to share real quick how the use cases can look like with regards to these CodeDoc and generative AI solution. So by this point, I hope you can see my screen, guys. So this is the web-based solution which utilizes the Gemini API, the Google generative AI solution, the model behind it. So we are starting with upload documents, and here multiple documents of different data, like structured and unstructured data, can be uploaded. Just for example, I'm uploading the PDF documents, which can be some scans, which can be some medical research or whatever about this patient. And let me also upload the conversation, some audio notes, like the voice memo from the previous conversation. Of course, just for the demo purposes, I'm using free documents, and it can be much more. So then, we are parsing the documents and giving the preview in terms of what is actually was in this document. And the operator, the user, can have a look and review that. Let's give it some time. Yep. So for instance, here, what contained in the PDF document, there might be very lengthy information, some of the summary of the information, and also speech to text solution that helps us to understand what was there in the audio file. So let me go next. Then here you may see that we tried our best to generate some of the standard prompts, and here is the list. For instance, I'm interested to understand what can be the all-established diagnosis for this patient based on the information I provided. It can be some other use cases. For instance, I love this one to include the ICD-10 codes for diagnosis, or for instance, the user can come up with their own prompt to answer some specific questions. Again, these prompts are just standard, just a suggestion, and they are not limited to some of the specific use cases. And then the magic happens. Let's see how the solution would reply to these answers based on the analysis of the information we uploaded, on the documents we uploaded. This could take some time, depending on the amount of information there. So here, basically, we can see what can be the output with regards to the questions we've selected, right? So I can copy them. I can probably export them if I want to in the format. So this type of things. Again, this can save a lot of time of the doctor, of the medical personnel with regards to exploring the materials, the medical information. Yeah, so this is just a small example of how the generative AI can actually free a lot of hours with regards to document processing.
Olga, when you think about what you just showed, obviously it's just a proof of concept, but the idea that, when you take generative AI and you have documents coming in, right? Let's say for the onboarding of patients into clinical trials, they have to sign consent forms, take training, send in training materials. All these things have to happen for people to actually enter them in the trial and get them set up in the system. But when you're using a system like this, you're pulling in that information, you're able to read it using the generative AI to categorize it, sort it, and you tie that in with something like robotic process automation, you can automate that entire process of onboarding new people into trials, or same thing when it comes to onboarding somebody in health insurance or claims processing for health insurance. That's where the managing, pulling in documents and setting up procedures, it can greatly, just improve efficiency in so many areas across healthcare and life sciences.
Absolutely. And depending on the use cases, the return of investment can really vary, I believe, from 150% to even much more, right? Calculated based on what is the actual amount of hours that can be freed with regards to just the simple use case. And totally agree, that's just a simple illustration of how the proof of concept of some generative AI may look like with regards to more shaped medical use case. And of course, it can be envisioned as probably a model, some of enhancement of the existing solutions that we may see on the market with regards to the medical software. But I believe it's a good time for having some questions and answer session. So please, dear guests, feel free to post your questions to our experts in the LinkedIn comments below the post, below the recording, and we'll pick the most interesting ones to reply. I see there are already some. Let me check.
Yeah, one was about actually spelling the different models, MedPOM, MedPOM2, MedLM. I don't know, Laura, if you want to go through that.
Well, obviously I cannot just spell them out, but whoever raised that question, please also feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I can also send you the links where you can find more information on that, or Olga, maybe we include that in the follow-up directly. Yes, it might sound a bit confusing at the beginning because there are so many abbreviations and so many different use cases, different tools to use, etc. But please, as I said, it's not rocket science. Reach out to me, I'm happy to share that. So basically what you can remember is there's MedLM for really specific medical cases, and Gemini is a multimodal model, so with different more generic use cases, but more powerful, so to say.
Thank you so much. Okay, as we are getting the questions, probably one of the questions that I would love maybe to start our discussion with is that it's typically the question that we get from our potential customers: if I can build the generative AI solution just only with in-house resources, so in-house development. So you can take this one. I mean, why not, right?
Yeah, sure, of course, why not? However, what we do recommend typically is that the GenAI and AI capability, it should not be treated as a standalone dark pocket or something exotic and exclusive. It should be treated as something that is scalable and very accessible, and it works, and everyone understands what value it can give to individual users, employees, product owners. That's why it is important that there is an AI champion on the client side, someone who actually advocates, thinks about the challenges. But one person is, you can repeat the learning curve, you can hire the data scientist if you want to, if this is the direction where you want to go strategically. However, to actually get to the market faster, to actually ramp up quickly, use a partner. And Google DataArt can be a great combination here. We can bring to the table all the learnings, best practices, what worked, what didn't, observations, ideas to the table. And it just saves the time that you would typically spend when you're approaching certain use cases or questions about technology. Because many of these questions have been answered before, and there is data to support that, there are blueprints, there are solutions pre-built, and it just saves literally time for how much time it will take from zero to hero when you can release something to your customers. So I would say that, yeah, that should be the combination between the in-house resources and the support that you can get from partners.
And let me just add something to that, sorry. I think also when we were asked before, we were talking about recommendation on how to start, get started. even if you're not yet a professional on AI topics, there are so many tools and solutions out there to get you accustomed to it that are easy to use, have a great user interface, and really help you along the way, so you lose that potential respect that you have when it comes to it and rather start doing something. And as I said before, even from a non-experienced user, it can be beneficial to just use a side panel and start asking for recommendations. But it goes, of course, all the way down to a very highly sophisticated solution where, of course, you would need a bit more experience and knowledge about how the tools work. But the bandwidth is amazing, and you can really just go out there and explore and familiarize yourself with it and create some small wins that will definitely help with the adaptation for you.
Thank you. We have a question. Dan, this one is for you. In what areas of healthcare do you see the biggest demand of generative AI solutions?
The biggest demand, right now it's still somewhat of the what I would call less what's the right word? Not the crazy things yet. I don't see a lot of people coming and saying, I want to create, a ChatGPT version of a doctor. It's more about, we have to process 2,000 documents a year in various different languages. How can generative AI help there? The bigger area right now, it's all about the building more efficiencies into the healthcare and life sciences area. In clinical trials, it's about the onboarding or even finding patients, being able to look at clinicaltrials.gov, understand all the inclusion-exclusion criteria for every clinical trial that's currently underway, and then being able to cross-check that to a medical database to identify patients that might be appropriate for those trials. It's things like this where you're speeding up the process, or again, I've seen a number of things for helping people with dementia, early detection, Alzheimer's, or those are the biggest areas. More traditional AI, on things like drug discovery and so on, but those are a little bit longer, more complex projects.
I just recall one of a really small but interesting, I would say even elegant use case that we came across at DataArt for one of our American clients. It was basically with regards to utilizing the generative AI capabilities for patients with some cognitive disorders. And basically the patient was supposed to generate a prompt in terms of what they would love generative AI to draw as a picture, and then pick the one that they loved most, right? So by this even simple training, some cognitive abilities may be improved in a very gamification manner, right? In a very enjoyable way. But we have a question. Can you collect data from a different vendor software as a service products to create a golden record? Okay, I believe it's a question of collecting data from multiple sources of different formats with regards to create some training based. I believe I understood the question correctly. Yuri, probably you can help me with this one.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I would also break the question into parts. So one challenge is to get the data. It can be structured, semi-structured data. It can be sourced from documents. It can be sourced from an API or a data source. And in the platform, typically what you would have a place where you store that data. ETL, ELT, you can have one place where you have everything. But then speaking about the golden record, what I think we can do right now with GenAI is to actually map different entities from different sources, from different systems, and create something that will actually be linked to its representations in different SaaS solutions. So, and to do this mapping, what we can do, we can use the model itself. We can use prompt engineering to actually look at the source data and try to build it, find similarities, find similar names or objects. But we can take a step back and use granular solutions. We can leverage the same vectorization technique This is something that we use when we build solutions with GenAI, and then quantify the individual data pieces into something that you can then compare as vectors, group them together, find similarities, and use that technique to find an aggregate entity that would represent a golden record for you. So yeah, these techniques we've explored. This is very possible. And it's just a matter of the quality of the data that you have and what you expect from it. Because a lot of it depends on the data, you need to prove whether the capability is actually achievable, whether and what will it take to build this solution. So yeah, I would answer it this way.
Yeah, I'll add something to what Yuri said, and it all comes down to what exactly do we call a golden record? There's obviously with protected health information and the variety of different EHRs that are out on the market. If we're talking about that information and getting all of the health information from everybody in any given country all in one place, that goes to local laws and how different countries deal with ownership of data. In the States, we have health information exchanges, but even those are regional. So usually, unless there was a changeover in laws on how we're going and the regulations around health data, the closest thing we could get to a golden record would be to have a system that constantly de-identified all health records and put them in one database managed by the government, so that we could use that for drug research and medical research and second opinions and virtual cohorts for clinical trials. But I think a lot's going to have to change for us to get there, and it's going to have to change as far as various countries and how they manage health records.
Thank you so much. Another question we have, how do you see the GenAI helping patients with health self-management and health literacy based on their own data? As far as I'm aware, definitely generative AI can be envisioned as the self-check, as the questionnaires or self-checks for specific diseases. But maybe Dan, you would love to elaborate a little bit more on the use cases here.
Yeah, talking about GenAI and how it's going to help in this area, obviously, it depends how far out we look, right? So in 6 months, it may be one thing. Maybe there will be, chatbots where you can interact with your healthcare, health insurance or your healthcare provider, where it's AI with some assistance from a human. But again, I think a lot of it comes down to, in the long term, having that AI concierge service, to be able to, things like, for instance, there's a product out there right now called AI Cure, where they use, it's not generative AI, but they use artificial intelligence. And I'm sure they're going to add generative AI to it to do medication adherence, where they video you taking your pill and determine whether you've actually swallowed it, all through the use of AI. And when we start seeing these different individual applications kind of come together into one platform that patients will use to manage their health, I think that's going to be the key thing, because it's the education, right? If I'm diagnosed with a certain condition, I should have on my concierge app all the educational materials I need to know, and it should prompt me to consume them as I'm going along in my care plan and learning more about my new condition. To have something that is texting you, asking you to take your medicine, or even asking you to take part in a medical diary, right? To keep track of how you're feeling, what you're doing, and have that information flow back to the medical record, so that the doctor, also using AI, can say, okay, what's new with Dan Piekarz since last time I've seen him? Does everything look the same, or are we seeing anomalies in what Dan is reporting in his concierge app? So I feel like AI is, what's going to bring a lot of all these different systems, and, whether it's telemedicine or a wearable or a patient diary. It's going to bring it all together into one location. It has to in time. And that's really where I think it's going to help the patient to be more engaged in their own care plan, to understand their care plan more, to know why they're taking a certain medicine, to understand what that medicine might interact with, right? If I go home and, maybe I want to take, I don't know, doxycycline or something else, or even a Benadryl, I can check, does this interact with any of the medications I'm on? So that's how I think it's going to help. It's going to be something that walks with us along our care journey.
And let me just add to that as well. I think what you nicely described is, of course, the human in the loop concept, where you always have someone making a decision. However, I think we can also all agree that health is something highly individual. So the potential here again is amazing, because you can take your individual data and make sure that a decision is based on this particular set of data points that you bring to the table, and not mine and not yours, but really the individual one of a human being, which is totally unique. And I think this is something that's really important to keep in the back of your mind. So even if you're getting a recommendation from a doctor and the doctor worked with GenAI, it still means that it is based on your individual inputs at that moment. And I think this is really crucial to differentiate from a one-size-fits-all approach.
And Laura, I think what you touched on also goes along with another question that came in around the risks associated with using GenAI for healthcare. And we all know that, there's hallucinations sometimes, right? Where generative AI can maybe make something up that isn't in the data. So we don't want doctors just acting based off of whatever is said or summarized by the AI. It's expected the doctor is going to have to double check the AI. Obviously, in time, I'm sure we can get to a point where we have GenAI double checking GenAI to reduce the number of hallucinations. But it does seem that these problems have been shrinking and occurring less and less as the new language models arise and new generative AI systems and platforms come out. Like you mentioned, MedPom 2 passed the medical exam in the US, but the one thing you didn't mention is it passed it with expert level grades, right? As better than most humans. So I think a lot of things are advancing, but also the other thing is when it comes to potential medical malpractice being blamed on AI, I think it comes down to the policies and procedures that the hospitals put in place around how doctors are supposed to use AI. And then on top of that, there's already malpractice insurance companies out there that have added aspects about the use of AI and how that can, how that works when it comes to malpractice insurance. So I think we're going to see all that kind of build out over time as we see AI being used more and more in healthcare.
Yeah, I want to add to this, Daniel. So it's one thing to establish processes, and it's important. But on the being proactive from the technology standpoint, what we can do, it's traceability. It's all what was the request, what was the source data, what was generated, and to be more precise, is the traceability of generated sentences and content. We sometimes can even link it to the content from the document or voice-to-text transcript to the piece that affected the output. So putting anchors into the source data. And then when you have the output, you also have the explanation why it was summarized this way, because of which statements exactly in the source document and where to find them. So, and it, of course, the usability of the feature and how easily a doctor can look at what was recommended by the AI and then see all the anchors and why, how quickly a doctor can find all of this, it affects the quality of the service altogether. But what I'm saying is that we kind of work on this from both directions, processes and also from the technology standpoint too.
And then let me also add one point to that. We briefly talked about the history of GenAI at Google. What has always been one of the baselines here are our AI principles, and I highly suggest everyone to look them up. So these are 7 principles which we follow whenever we're pursuing anything AI related. And what's also important is that we specifically state cases which we will not pursue under any circumstance. And I think this is also important. And when you think back of the decision to go with a model versus going with a platform, surely when you want to have a ethically responsible AI, this is some factor that you should take into consideration as well.
Absolutely.
One thing we didn't touch on too much is potential bias in data, right? So, and I think this might have actually, you brought up Mayo Clinic, and I think this, what I'm about to mention, I actually, looking into what you guys have done with Mayo Clinic, I'm pretty sure this is where I got this one from. For instance, they were talking about how in the US, certain ethnicities tend to get prescribed less opiates when they're in pain. So if you were to allow, and it's you know, why has a lot of factors. It could be getting care in an area where there's not enough of a supply. It could be a lot of things causing that in the data. But if you were to rely on GenAI to look and say, how much should I prescribe to this person? You don't want things like their ethnicity taken into account, unless, of course, for instance, there's a known genetic marker for people of a certain ethnicity and a certain drug, but you really wouldn't know that entirely unless you had their genomic data also. But anyway, it's, you know, there is that aspect of making sure the data you're using is not biased data, because that can also obviously cause potential risks when it comes to any kind of AI, really.
Indeed. I think ethics in AI overall can be a topic for separate roundtable to discuss, and there are multiple already. Let's maybe give just a minute to address one of the questions which is left. What differentiates the CodeOak, the copilot that we created, a DataArt functionality, from other GenAI options like ChatGPT-4, for example? You can try to address this one real quick.
Yeah, so one thing is to have a general purpose model or a multimodal engine, and the other thing is to have a solution, a concept that has some use case in mind, which means that there will be pre-built prompts, there will be pre-built sentences, there is a UI that actually is tailored towards the need of a customer, and that's what makes it different. Always think that not everyone is a prompt engineering expert. You don't have everyone in your organization educated on what are the performance of a given model, how it handles the context, does it pay attention to details in the beginning of the statement or at the end. And there are a couple of dozens of different metrics how they compare models to each other. There is a sophisticated benchmark and everything. But the point of the prototype that was displayed is that it is already tailored towards the need of a customer. And that's why it's a differentiator here. So that's what I would say to this question.
Thank you so much. Dear audience, wow, that was very enjoyable. And we hope that you enjoyed this hour that you spent with us. We're really grateful for you that you decided to stay with us and watch it till end. By the way, if you have any additional questions or comments, any specific feedback, or you would love to have some continuation of such type of LinkedIn expert panel discussions, I have an idea in terms of the topics or questions you'd love to cover, please post them in the comments section. And if you're around in Munich on 31st of January this year, just next week, we welcome you with Laura at the joint event that DataArt and Google will be holding. So this is for our clients and for Google partners with regards to demonstrating the generative AI capabilities with healthcare and not only, so across different industries. So if you're interested to attend it, it's free, but please secure a space by following the link. You will find it in the comments. My colleagues will post it. At this stage, I think, yeah, we would just say thank you and goodbye, and hopefully see you on our next LinkedIn panel discussions. Take care.
Thanks
very much.
Thank you. Bye.